and respecting everybody's schedule, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Matt Green. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer with Sales Assembly here in Chicago. And this past week has been a really long year, hasn't it? Lots been going on, and fortunately, we're here with Todd Caponi to go through some really actionable content. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got here today. Sales Assembly, for those of you that aren't familiar, organization based here in Chicago. We're a community of around 120 of Chicago's most prominent B2B technology companies. And the reason that we're here today is we understand that there is a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of stress going on right now, and we need answers as far as some best practices and tactics that we as sales leaders and as salespeople could implement right now in our businesses to have a distinctive difference on how we go about our day-to-day. And fortunately, if there's somebody who's going to be a subject matter expert on this topic on navigating a fast-growing B2B technology sales organization through this type of uncertainty, it's somebody like Todd Caponi, who's done this firsthand, successfully navigated and won awards and accolades for the way that he navigated his sales organization through the 2008 financial crisis. So I'd like to turn it over to Todd in a moment, but before I do that, I do want to thank our partners that made today possible: Path Factory, Gong, Sendoso, Outreach, and of course, Sales Melon. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Caponi.
All right, thank you. You can hear me all right? Cool. All right, awesome. So let's start. Let's get right into it. So I want you to come with me for a moment. We are going to go into the woods. So we are, just picture you're in the woods and you're with a bunch of buddies. And as you're walking, you hear something in the distance, some crackle, there's something there. What happens? Well, the first thing that happens, right, is your hands start getting a little sweaty, your heart starts to race. Now, did you consciously say, oh, you know what? That might be a bear or something out there to kill me? Or did your subconscious kick in, your reptilian brain, and say, oh my gosh, I need to prepare for the worst case scenario right now. I need, get ready to either fight or flight. We as human beings are wired for false positives. It's literally why we survived as a species for as long as we've been on Earth. It's literally to overreact to potential threats that are in front of us. And to take that into the working world, imagine you walk into the office and you're walking in and your boss is walking the other way. And your boss, for some reason, doesn't make eye contact with you, kind of walks by, doesn't even acknowledge you. Your subconscious goes, oh my God, I must have done something terrible. Apparently, I'm on the boss's bad list. When it could just be the boss has got something else going on. You look in, you walk into the office and you see in a conference room, all your peers are in a meeting and you weren't invited to it. You automatically go to worst case scenario. Well, uncertainty is this thing that is this absolute crazy maker for the brain. As a matter of fact, when we can't predict what's about to happen to us, our IQ actually drops when we're in the moment. So our brain's efficiency and the way we work goes down. And we're literally wired to try to predict what our experience is going to be. I heard a quote this morning that until the sentence about all that's going on right now ends with a period instead of a comma, like we're hearing today, we are going to be in overreact and uncertain mode. And uncertainty obviously drives kind of crazy behavior that I think we're all seeing right now. But the reason that I pulled you all together onto this virtual conference today is, as people, if you could read your buyers' minds, like, wouldn't that really help you? Well, one of the fortunate things about going on is you can absolutely read the buyers' minds. As a matter of fact, why do you think that there were 700 people signed up for this virtual conference today? It's because Matt and I and Jeff and the Sales Assembly team looked at this and said, you know what, we can actually predict what our potential clientele care about right now. And we're going to give instead of take, right? And that's what it's really all about. You can predict the minds of your buyers right now, and I want to help you do that. So let's dig in a little bit. And I want you to first start with this whole concept of empathy. So what do you do when you're faced with like a personal recession or a personal downturn, or when you see a threat that's in front of you? Like, I want you to think personally for a second. The first thing you probably do is you cut down on your discretionary or nice to have spending. So, my wife and I were driving and we drove by a furniture store that has a kind of like a going out of business sale. And she's like, man, I would really love a new couch. But then we kind of looked at each other like, yeah, but that could probably wait. A friend of mine is interested in buying a new car and is now going, all right, can I get my car through this kind of period of uncertainty, or like, do I really need one right now? So the nice to have is, you think about a personal trainer, having a personal trainer, they're awesome, but gosh, right now when things are uncertain and you don't even know what worst case can look like, you probably cut that out or at least lower it. And then, if things actually get bad, the optics of some of these things looks kind of crazy too. So we cut out the discretionary spending. That's number one. Number two, what do? Well, we look at our essentials. So what are the things that we need to have that just, our day to day? And then when we look at those essentials, what can we do to extend our runway? Meaning, if we're going to go buy a gallon of milk, do we say, all right, I can go to Whole Foods and get a gallon of milk that came from a cow for $8? Or, hey, you know what? I could probably go to Aldi and get a gallon of milk that came from a cow too for $4. Maybe I should go there. As a matter of fact, on Monday morning, I was at the gym and it was about 8:15 Central Time. And I got down, I got in the car and I was like, oh my gosh, I have no gas. I looked across the street, literally across the street from my gym is a gas station. But I was like, you know what? I don't think that's the cheapest around. So what did I do? I drove a mile away to go save 10 cents a gallon. And so, gosh, proud Todd, I just saved $1.50 on a tank of gas, 15 gallons. And then right at 8:30 Central Time, I probably lost a crap ton of money in my 401k. But it's this whole idea of, hey, control the controllables. What are for me, for us as human beings? And then how do we cut costs on those? The third thing that we do is then we also seek to reduce risks, right? So we are trying to protect against the downside. So our brains in a potential downturn go, what is the worst thing that can happen? And then now we need to start protecting against that downside. And so this was a headline from Tuesday morning. I don't know if you saw it, but I don't know why there's such thing as a coronavirus conference, but it's kind of ironic that got canceled because of coronavirus. But in personal downturns or personal uncertainty, threats ahead, and we don't know what can happen, what do? We try to reduce our risks. And I think we're seeing all of that right now. And then the next thing that we do, the fourth thing, is we tend to do what everybody else is doing. We tend to look around and see that, hey, everybody's making a run on toilet paper. Gosh, you know what? I didn't even think about that. Maybe we should go make a run on toilet paper. I heard this morning that at Target, pallets of toilet paper in an hour and a half. Now, this picture cracks me up because you can see here that most of the toilet paper is gone. But regardless how bad the crisis ever gets, I mean, the single ply stuff, come on, I guess we'll survive, right? But the point is, when we see other people doing things, when we see people making different kinds of decisions, we tend to flock to that because we think maybe they know something we don't. So if we look at that and go, all right, as human beings, when we're faced with a personal downturn, here are the four things that we're going to try to do. Reduce discretionary spending, figure out what we can do without, reduce the costs on the things that we need, and on those things, see if there's ways to get prices, get the investment down on those. Reduce our downside risk. So what is the worst thing that can happen? How do we protect against that? And then look at what everybody else is doing and kind of run alongside them because they must know something that we don't. Well, when I say that you can predict what your buyers are thinking, your customers, your prospects, as it turns out, all of your targets are human beings too. Every executive is being asked right now to do the exact same four things that you as a person, as a personal, human being would do. I've talked to 10 different CEOs this week, and every single one said, hey, time to configure your contingency plan. And guess what's in the contingency plan? Well, it's really those top three. And that fourth one, there's a little bit of that when they're putting together their plans. They're calling their buddies and saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? Maybe we should be doing that too. As a matter of fact, Sequoia, many of you have probably heard that the private equity firm or the venture firm Sequoia issued this guidance to not only their portfolio founders, but to essentially everybody. They put it out there calling this a black swan event, and basically telling them, hey, listen, these are the things that you need to focus on. Start doing it right now. Get ahead of it. So what I want to take you through is, it looks like we've got a little bit of noise on the line. I hope that's not too distracting. But what I want to take you through is 5 steps that you, as a sales professional, as a sales executive, as any executive running any business, should be doing right now. And I'm going to tell you a little story along the way about what some of the things that we did 12 years ago that turned us from barely keeping the lights on into a 400% year-over-year grower. And then I won something called the Stevie Award in 2009 for Worldwide VP of Sales of the Year for how we took the company through that. And if you're looking for something like you want to make fun of me, there is a video on YouTube of me accepting the award at Caesar's Palace in Vegas. I look like I dipped my face in a bag of charcoal, like I used to have that really dark beard. But anyway, I'm going to tell you the story of that, and then we're going to put it into terms that you can go use right now, because now is the time. And I'll leave you with, when I say now is the time, you want to be doing all of this today and on Monday, because it's the rational light of day. You don't want to be doing it when things potentially get near worst case, which maybe they will, maybe they won't, where you're in the fetal position, taking a cold shower crying, right? Now is the time to do this stuff. So let's dig in to what those 5 things are. All right. So the first thing that I want all of you to think about is your current messaging. When you make a call, when you send an email, when you talk to a potential prospect, when you talk to an existing customer about their renewals, about their upsells, evaluate your current message. And what I mean by that is messaging that was created during an up market is not going to work in a down market, meaning things that were created then do not work when all of the circumstances have changed, when all of the things that our buyers are thinking about have changed. We need to reevaluate that. As a matter of fact, I, as a speaker and a teacher, changed my whole website over the last couple of days. Like, wouldn't it be crazy if I was out there still talking about doing in-person workshops and speaking at conferences? Like, there aren't any. That's dumb. So you've got to switch. So the first step you've got to do is to take a look at your current messaging. And so how do you do that? Well, the first thing that you want to do is to ask yourself, all right, how are we currently positioning ourselves? And are we positioning any piece of it as discretionary, as a nice to have? Remember those 4 things. If a buyer is saying we need to reduce discretionary and nice to haves, but your messaging contains, hey, wouldn't this be cool? That's check mark number 1. You want to put a nice red flag next to that one. Number 2 is to look at what elements of your offering that you believe are a must-have as it aligns to the 4 things that I told you about. Reducing discretionary, taking a look at your essentials and increasing your runway on those, reducing risk, and then kind of looking around and seeing what everybody else is doing in this. And then the third piece of this is to figure out whether you're positioning yourselves as the Whole Foods or the Aldi, as I was talking about before, or as the gas station that charges a little bit more for the same thing that you can get a mile down the street. Again, we can read our buyers' minds right now, so have that empathy for how you would act during your own personal recession or downturn, and then apply that to your messaging. How would I react when I'm reading the messaging that we is obviously, once we've evaluated our messaging, we've got to escalate our messaging. And so the thing I want you to think about here is that every organization at any time has 100 problems, right? I mean, they could fix all kinds of stuff. There's always a problem that can be fixed, but know that at most times, there's probably only 5 to 10 that can be fixed at one time. Now, when you get into a tightened market and you get this uncertainty and you get this overreaction, guess what happens? Everybody's focus tightens. right? And they tighten on even a smaller number of problems. So when we think about problems, we need to think about, all right, those problems, do they matter? Are they ankle biter problems? Or what can we do to escalate them to the things that matter right now? So let's take a look at escalating your message. The first thing is eliminate your discretionary language. So I want to tell you that story about what happened in 2007 to 2009. I had joined a company in 2006 called Right Hemisphere. And I don't want to get too nerdy about what they do. So at a high level, what we did though is we took engineering or CAD data. So like an engineer would design an airplane. We took that CAD data and unlocked it so that people in the rest of the organization could use it, essentially. So imagine you're in the training department and right now you're creating assembly instructions for the people putting together airplanes on the shop floor that look like IKEA instructions, right? What we were helping them to do is unlock that so they can get much richer images and 3D views so that they could train people to do their jobs better, right? So that sounds super cool, doesn't it? Unlocking CAD data so you could do 3D visual work instructions. Well, guess what? In a downturn, nobody gives a crap about cool. Nobody gives a crap about 3D and spinning and visualization, right? So we had to eliminate the cool parts of what we were talking about. So that was number one. The number two thing is then to focus on reduce your focus on revenue growth. I want everybody, if you're kind of zoning out for a second, I want you to snap back in here because this is an important one. When we talk about reducing focus on revenue growth, you know the four things that we talked about? Did I mention that that executives are really focused on revenue growth? I didn't, and that's actually on purpose. When Sequoia is issuing a black swan event notice to their customer or their portfolio base, they are subconsciously giving every executive in that room an excuse to miss their short-term revenue goals. So from a priority perspective, man, it would be awesome to still hit our quarterly quota. Hitting quarterly quota actually in a downturn becomes a nice to have. I know that sounds insane and very counterintuitive, but right now, those executives have already come to the conclusion that they've got an excuse to miss their number this quarter. I know it's crazy. You'll probably yell at me, but I'm telling you, they are focused on getting rid of discretionary and extending their runway on the essentials while, maintaining their risk levels. That's it. All right. So when you escalate your message, you can take out that we're going to make you it's still on LinkedIn today. I think I got 5 different people reaching out to me saying, hey, do you need, 50% more leads? Like right now, that would be great. But what I really need is to extend my runway and reduce my discretionary costs, right? So deprioritize the focus on revenue growth. Again, the focus now becomes on runway extension and cost reduction, where we are also enhancing our focus on risk maintenance and risk reduction. So let me finish that story about Right Hemisphere. We were a cool technology that helped with training issues, the effectiveness of training. Nobody cares. We went into a large airplane manufacturer in Seattle, Washington. You could probably guess who it is. And they had an issue with their training effectiveness that basically boiled up before the downturn really took effect. They were trying to get, this will give it away, they were trying to get 787s out the door. Right. And so they had a lot of pressure on them around the effectiveness and their time to market. But we were talking to basically the training department and some people in manufacturing. So we took that, hey, nice to have around our training message. And we started poking and picking. And this is what you should do, right? To think about how you ask questions that get your little problem, that's one of 100, up to the one of 3 that they're actually going to focus on. So what we did is ask this training issue a big deal. And they responded, well, we've got these individuals that are on the assembly lines that are putting together the planes. Unfortunately, they're not, this was not, I think I'm probably miswording this, but they were like, they're not the smartest people in the world. They're a little harder to train. And so what's happening is we can train each individual to do 1 to 2 assemblies and do them pretty well. And we think that with better enhanced training tools, we could get them to do 3, 4, maybe 5. Like, all right, so you want to be able to take get more out of the individuals that you've got putting this stuff together. Like, yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about what 4 or 5 would do. And they're like, well, I think they would do them a lot faster, and we'd probably be able to reduce the amount of safety checks that we need to do to just make sure, because they were making a bunch of mistakes before. And so we think that this is going to help us get these planes done faster. Like, all right, hold on. So your goal with fixing this training issue is to reduce your labor costs and increase your time to market on 787s during a time when everybody's got their eyes on it? Like, yeah. Oh, all right. So that just, instead of becoming a 5-figure issue, became a 7-figure issue. And we were able to escalate it and broaden it really, really quickly, because it was top of mind for every single executive in that organization. We could read their minds. So what ended up happening is, at the time, we're a $3 million in revenue organization. That one deal was a $7 million deal that we got with Boeing. And then we took that same story to Northrop Grumman, to Gulfstream, to Cessna. And then we started to work and broaden a little bit and went to the oil and gas companies like Schlumberger and Halliburton. But it was just a case of going, all right, cool training technology, but what does it really matter? You've got to pull back and get those customers to articulate the cost reduction, and then, of course, that speeding time to market was a huge one for them. Okay, so that's escalate your message. The third thing that I want you to think about is to empathize with your target. And what do I mean by empathize with your target? Well, first of all, we already taught you a little bit about how do you empathize with your target from the perspective of understanding what they're having to deal with, and how they kind of react to uncertainty. And again, we're wired to overreact. That's what's kept us alive for however many millions of years we've been here. But I also want you to empathize in another way. I have seen online on LinkedIn a couple of posts from people saying, hey, listen, when things get tough, you got to sell through it, right? More calls, more emails, more voicemails. And like that scares the crap out of me. Because right when these individuals that you're having to sell to and talk to and prospect to they're feeling stress, they're vulnerable, their engagement is like, what are we going to do? They then wake up the next morning and they see an inbox that looks like this, right? That all of a sudden, there was a stat that said that right now it takes on average 18 touches to get a prospect to respond. So that's the average. And so let's just take that stat and say, all right, let's say that 100 people are reaching out to you individually. It's in your inbox that are unwanted. And the second piece of this is, look, this is a snapshot of my inbox as the Chief Revenue Officer of Power Reviews, which I was up until a couple of years ago. The thing I want you to recognize is that as human beings, as executives, our priorities right now are always, first of all, they're our team, our customers, and our prospects, right? So those are our top 3 priorities. But then beyond that, when I'm thinking about my team, my customers, my prospects, I'm thinking, again, I'm going to say this like 4,000 times: reduce discretionary costs, extend runway on essentials, and reduce risk, right? And so I look at my inbox, and what's the first thing you see? Well, I bet you all of you that are looking on the virtual display right now are probably reading the previews more than the subject line, right? We are drawn to that. We're trying to predict what this email is going to be. And when you see every single email starts with me, guess which emails on this list are going to get opened? None, right? The I wanted tos, I was just checking, I'd love to, I've sent a couple of emails, I wanted to. In a time like this, our goal, we are able to predict what our customers are thinking, is to be personalized and valuable. Give, make it evident in the first 10 words of your email. All right. So instead of the I wanted to, it's, hey, in uncertain times, here's a webinar that will teach your sales organization how to battle through this, right? It's an executive. That's what I'm thinking about. That's why there's, hundreds of people on this webinar right now. We are able to predict what you were all thinking. And we gave it to you. We're giving. There's no ask and return. Give, 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 and get the I wanted tos, and especially the guilt trips out of the start of your emails. Again, think about the people that you're prospecting to. You are not the only one coming at them. Take it easy, right? And adjust your focus on personalized and valuable. And you're going to see a lot more interaction, because this inbox right here got a quick select all and delete. The fourth thing in the steps here. So the first thing that we did was we evaluated our messaging. Number 2 was to escalate it. Number 3 was to empathize with our buyers. Number 4 is to remove friction from the journey. What that means is, imagine that you've got something that can really help me out right now, but wow, it's going to be a really long evaluation. It's going to be a really hard implementation. Guess what? It can wait. There's no way that anything that looks complicated from an implementation, or even more important, is complicated for the way you are selling it, needs to come out. And so the point here is, this was a data point that the Corporate Executive Board did in 2017. They've since been bought by Gartner. But I want you to think about the decision process that buyers go through. So in a typical consensus sale, buyers are spending their time, only 39% of it, so the 22 plus 17, I wasn't a math major, but I think I got that right. 22 plus 17 means they are spending only 39% of their buying time talking to you, talking to your competitors, and talking to their internal buying groups. The other 61% is doing other stuff. And that other stuff is things like back channeling you and trying to get at the information that they can't get, or they're not getting from you, right? Because they don't trust you, because we're presenting things as being perfect. So what do we do there? Well, obviously, shameless plug, but the transparency sale is about removing friction from the buying journey and giving the buyer everything that they need to be able to make a fast, confident purchase and predict their own future, right? The other piece here, though, that makes things doubly difficult is that number up here again, that 22% of time the buyer's spending in internal meetings with their buyer group. So if you've got a consensus sale ahead of you and you're selling to a group, and they normally spend 22% of their time with their internal buying group, and that's probably not going to change. They're all working from home now. So it just became even harder to do, right? So you've got to do everything you can to embrace making it easy to decide, and then painting the picture that it's easy to implement. So let's look at your sales process for a second. Your sales process hopefully is aligned to the buying journey. It's not still focused on what did we do as salespeople. And when I think about the buying journey, as you've heard, and I'm not the only one that talks this way, is the first thing a buyer does is decide whether or not their status quo is sustainable, and they go to why change. And then once they decide to change, they decide, well, should I go with you or go with somebody else? And then once they decide we're going to go with you, it becomes, why should we do this now? Well, let's look at why change. The 4 things that you could be thinking about in removing friction from the buying journey. Number 1 is obviously what we've talked about already, which is that messaging optimization. So again, align your messaging around what the buyer is thinking and dealing with right now. Number 2 is give. What can you do to be a trusted partner and help them through this instead of try to sell them through this? Number 3, tight discovery. And what I mean by this is I've bought a lot of software, unfortunately. And so many times, like there'd be a call and be like, yeah, I'd love to learn more about what you're doing, how it aligns to what our goals are. I get on an hour discovery call and I get asked every question except my social security number. And at the end of that hour call, they're like, all right, well, let's schedule another call and we'll do a demo. I'm like, oh, gosh, all right, this is killing me. I need the information to be able to predict what my experiences together. Get enough of the discovery information to know that you're spending your time wisely and that what you're about to present is going to hit home. If it's not, end the call. And then transparency, of course, is this whole element of, hey, what is the buyer going to find when they do their research? What might not work in their environment? And give them to that upfront. It's going to help you not only close deals faster, but increase your win rate considerably, because you're going to qualify deals out a lot faster. And the ones that you qualify in are going to be a lot tighter and more opportune to actually buy what you're selling them. And then in the end, you make it really, really hard on your competitors too. When you're presenting transparently and talking about, here's your options, here's what might not work, that helps build trust. And when the customer goes out and does their own homework and finds it matches, that's when that 61% in that last slide shrinks dramatically and your sales cycle shrink. Why us? Is the pros and cons. Again, continue to be transparent, but be transparent in the way that you deliver pricing, provide transparent references, and streamline the actualization. So with those three, transparent pricing is to give the customer, like, don't hide it. We're not negotiating the release of hostages when we're trying to get a deal done. Transparent pricing is to say, hey, listen, so that you can make a really strong decision at the beginning of the sales cycle. These are the four things that our pricing is based on. And as we try to get that down to help you during this time, here's the four ways that we'll be able to do it. Number one is the volume. So the more volume you commit to, the better it is for us, the more we'll be able to help you in the form of a discount. Number two is the timing of cash. The faster you pay, it turns out we like money, the more we're going to be willing to help you in the form of a discount. Number three is the length of commitment. I know it's hard to think to the future right now, but the longer you're willing to commit, the better it is for us and the more we're willing to help you in the form of a discount. And number four is the timing of the deal. The better able we are to predict our business allows us to resource. There's value in that to us. So we're going to pass that value to you, and being able to align around a close date, we're going to pay you in the form of a discount for that. That's transparent pricing. Transparent references are giving references that can paint both pros and cons. So often we give references that are like, oh, they were awesome, it was perfect, everything was great, there was sunshine, lollipops, the sun was out all the time. That doesn't actually help a buyer buy anything. Having transparent references that help buyers predict what their experience is going to be like, not only, number one, allows those references to feel more comfortable giving a reference, but number two is it potentially opens up more references for you to use. Because right now you're probably only looking at the ones that are going to paint you as perfect. And then streamline actualization. This is about trying to figure out, how do we get a customer to a goal with as small, the limited number of steps as possible. So for anything that you're selling that's complex, figure out ways that you can paint a picture for the buyer of what that journey is going to be like. And if it's uncertain, remember that word, if it's uncertain, they're probably not going to buy from you. So you've got to create a certain path and then take out the unnecessary steps. It's got to be smooth. And then the last piece is the why now. So, obviously transparent negotiating. So it's going to come down to, when you think about transparent pricing, that flows to transparent negotiating. When they ask for the discount, they're like, hey, listen, our budgets are tight. You can say, all right, I understand. I think we've got ways that we can help you. Commit to more volume, pay us faster, commit longer, help us forecast. But the terms and conditions, and can we optimize them? This is an area that we could probably do a whole nother webinar on, but typically contracts become this, I don't trust you, you don't trust me. So this is going to be a really long, painful process. Our lawyers are going to try to figure out how you're trying to screw us. And then our lawyers are going to provide some language back that's meant to screw you back. Right. And so it becomes this battle. And then we can't even predict when these deals get done because it's stuck in legal for 4, 5, 6 weeks. What kinds of things can you do to remove opposing language from your contracts that drive polarization and drive lack of trust? So in other words, when you deliver a contract, can you say, can you deliver a little cover sheet with it that says, hey, here's the things that you're going to find in here and why we've written them the way we do? The lawyers are people too. If you can make them feel like human beings and then educate them along the path and make your contract the easiest contract that they work with all day, they're going to love you and they're going to want to prioritize that in their day. So think about making the journey easy and removing as much friction from that process as possible. All right. So now the last thing I want you to think about is to hook them on a feeling. All right. And so there's a couple of things here. I'm not going to talk much about this because I think I've beat it up a lot, but I want you to remember that we as human beings, We make all of our decisions in the feeling and emotion center of our brain. It's called the limbic. So we make these feeling, emotion-centered decisions, and then we use logic to back it up, to the point where logic becomes really polarizing. So if we lead with logic, if we lead with data, and we already walk in with a preconceived opinion, that data is actually used to polarize. It's funny, I just like strolling through Facebook, I see people making the argument for the fact that we are doing the right things around coronavirus protection. And then the same string, there's one that's why we are totally overreacting. And they're both using data. And guess what? If you've already got an opinion on it, whatever data your buddies are going to share about, oh, the death rate is 5 times more than the flu, so we need to be scared. And then there's other people that are like, we don't need to be scared. There's much worse things out there. We are more likely to die from choking on our toothbrush than the coronavirus. I'm like, oh, thanks for that. Now I got to worry when I'm brushing my teeth. The data that you share is only being used to reinforce your pre-existing opinions. So be careful leading with data and numbers and facts and ROI. And instead, we need to tell stories and inject emotion into the process, because it's the stories and the emotion that actually drive behavior and not your data. All right, so that's that. The other piece I wanted to talk about real quick is this fact that confidence is actually contagious. Fear is contagious. So we as human beings, when we sense fear in somebody else, what happens is that area of our brain actually lights up and we become slightly more fearful. When we sense confidence in somebody else, oftentimes that area of our brain lights up and now we feel more confident. And so what I mean by that is if you come in, oh, things suck, right? And you come in with this kind of woe is me or scared or freaking out, the customer actually senses that and that part of their brain freaks out a little bit. So what do I mean by that? It's just to reinforce the fact that for all of us, these downturns and these uncertainties oftentimes turn out to be really strong opportunities for opportunity, right? The fact that we start to, when you have a lot of money, you have a lot of choices. When you don't have a lot of money, your choices thin, your focus thins, and you become a lot more intentional in the things that you buy. So take advantage of that. Let's think about companies like P&G, who was founded in what was called the Panic of 1837. Like they actually called it the Panic. In 1872, there was a time called economic chaos, which is when GE was founded. McDonald's was actually started right at the beginning of World War II. Imagine we're starting a world war right now and you're like, hey, I'm gonna open a restaurant. Like that's crazy, right? But there's opportunity here for you. Home Depot, Microsoft, Apple, all started in the 1970s during what was called stagflation, which is the combination of stagnant growth and high inflation. Companies like Facebook and Twitter started during the technology bubble burst right after 2000, so 2001, 2002, 2003, when that bubble had burst and it was taking a long time for technology to come back. And by the way, Apple reinvented themselves in 2002, didn't they? So there is huge opportunity. And then we look at the last downturn in 2007 through 2009, and there's great companies like Airbnb and Stripe that started then. So people still spend money. They're just a lot tighter around what they spend it on. And those things mean that disruption creates opportunity. And now is the time to focus. And what I mean by focus is to do those things that we just talked about. Number one, again, evaluate your message. If there's any discretionary language in it, you got to take that out, right? So you've got to identify whether or not discretionary messages are in your current message and empathize. Think like they do. If I were you and all of a sudden I had to cut costs and extend my runway, would that pitch resonate with me? Is to escalate that message and go, all right, how do we take that messaging and we change it and we flip it around and we make sure that we're hitting on the things that we know every executive is dealing with right now. Once we do that, we need to empathize with our target. So instead of me, and I'm going to pound you with emails and calls and voicemails that are about me, make it about the customer and what they're thinking about and give. Create that magnet. All right. And then once you get them and you start talking to them, we've got to do everything to make buying easy and actualization easy. So remove friction from that whole journey for them. And then lastly, think about not only not leading with data, lead with stories and inject emotion and feeling, but be confident that know that all is not lost right now. As a matter of fact, downturns create incredible opportunities, and that there potentially is a one working with your organization. All right. So with that, shameless plug time. I just wanted to let you know, and we're going to answer a couple of questions here if we've got time to. I think we're doing right on time. Obviously, I'm not doing in-person workshops and very big speeches right now because that actually doesn't make sense. But I would love to help your organization think through these things and make it specific to you. So if you're interested in any kind of virtual custom workshop, let me know. You can reach me through transparencysale.com. After we're done here, we're going to put together a little landing page. Right now it's at toddtalks.online. It doesn't look very pretty, so don't judge. But we're going to put links to this virtual conference, announcements about additional ones that we're going to start doing. As a matter of fact, our plan is to do another one next Friday. And that one is going to be more around sales engagement and how to make sure that we maintain the momentum and the engagement from our selling organizations when we start losing the office and people have to be remote. So more information will be there, but I'm sure we'll annoy you on LinkedIn and emails with announcements about that too. And then of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least talk about the book because there's a lot in there around how you optimize and remove friction from the buying journey. And as always, you can follow or connect with me on LinkedIn and you can follow me on Twitter. I've got lots of nonsense going on there too. So Matt, with that, would love to take a couple of questions if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I figured got a lot of questions via chat, so thank you for that, everybody. I think that we'll have time for maybe 2 or 3. I got a couple of variations of this one, which is actually really interesting. We have a couple of folks that are on that are on the call right now. They just happen to sell solutions that have to deal with remote training, virtual solutions, so on and so forth. And as you can imagine, in a time like this, they're worried about coming off as though they're taking advantage of the situation. So when we are reaching out to prospects, if we just happen to sell a solution that, to be clear, in the current environment could really help, how do we navigate the sensitivity of the messaging right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you've got to use empathy, right? I was working with a company earlier in the week that is kind of like an online community that allows people to connect for jobs and has job listings and work with companies that do that. And their current messaging has been, gosh, in times of high growth, man, you really need us. And then you take a step back and go, yeah, there's no high growth around. Like, we've got to get rid of that high growth message and switch to, hey, in times like these, we need to be keeping the pipeline full because there might be this issue of engagement. We might have people that are at home that are looking for jobs. Like, we've got to keep that pipeline going, and we can't afford the costs of losing people right now because that would be mortifying, right? So it's a matter of taking your messaging and at least pointing to the things that matter, which is reducing cost and then reducing risk, which is that one. If you're working, I think that as an executive, if you're going to help me with the virtual environment right now, I want to hear from you. Like I do. I maybe that's just me. And if there's other executives that want to chime in on this, like we could create a little chat about it at some point. But every executive I've talked to this week is worried about that too. They're worried about a loss in production as everybody goes home to work that's never done it before. I know for me, I love working at home. I've become infinitely more engaged and productive. However, the first 2 weeks that I started doing it, I was just like, oh, is that the mail? Like, I'm going to go get the mail. I could really use some coffee. Oh gosh, that screw on that thing needs to be tightened. And the next thing you know, I wasn't getting anything done. So the bottom line is it's not taking advantage as long as you're not being overt about it. I think I want to hear from the types of companies that are going to help me get through this process and just empathize. Like, how would you feel receiving that message? And maybe, like, one last thing, you might offend a percentage of those people. I think I'd be all right with that. If you reach out and talk to 100 people and 95 of them really care, but you're worried about the 5% that are going to go, what are you doing? I think like now is not the time to worry too much about that.
Okay. No, that's great. I mean, sort of an extension of that, and I know that you spoke to this a little bit earlier. You know, there is a, I know that there's a story. I saw it myself going around LinkedIn right now. Salesperson calls in, you know, gets a senior executive or the CEO of an airline. To your point about selling into the airline industry earlier, and I mean, as you can imagine, you know, just the general reaction was, you know, how can you call me in general right now? I mean, you know, with everything that I'm dealing with, and to be clear, airline industry taking an especially bad hit right now, but I assume that that's going to extend to other industries in general. So how do we just navigate that initial gut reaction? Like, look, I mean, what are you doing? Why now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the things that these executives are caring about. Now, if you called, I can't imagine calling the CEO of United right now. Like, if like that dude is upset, you probably had it coming. It's, you know, when I think about that right hemisphere,
off my to-do list for today, then.
exactly. You know, when I think about that right hemisphere story about, you know, we're working with this training department, it became, hey, we can escalate this. We should probably get the VP of manufacturing involved in this because, you know, he really cares about this. And you still have to be pinpointed in the targeting, and then your messaging aligned to what these individuals are thinking about. Like I'm proud of whoever is calling a CEO, but if your solution helps, as a matter of fact, my brother-in-law is responsible for United Express and the whole process by which they make sure that planes are clean right now. Now he's stressed out, he's working around the clock, but if you've got something that's going to help make that easier, I know he wants to hear from you. Right? So like, take it easy, but be pinpointed. I'm not saying call the CEO of United, maybe find out who is responsible for that process and be a giver, right? It's not like, here's what we do. It's here. I understand that this is what you're dealing with and maybe we can help, but here's some information or something to make you smarter, make you better at doing what you do.
Great. No, that's perfect. One last question, I think, before we wrap up. I think it's a really important one. We've been talking a lot today about dealing with prospects and dealing with customers. Would love to hear your thoughts for the leaders that are on this program right now. You know, hey, how do we navigate our teams through this environment? You know, how much overlap is there in some of these points that you hit on as far as empathy? You know, how do we translate all these learnings you laid out today to lead our teams, or how do we just do that in general in a time like this?
Well, yeah, I think we're going to talk about that next Friday, right? Just talking about general leadership and engagement. I think specific to this, you know, as individual sales people, it's time to be conscious of the way that you're messaging and the way that, and the lives of the people that you're messaging to, right? Those are the two first things. As leaders, I think you've got to reinforce that and pull your teams together, get with marketing right now, and start to look and go through the 5 steps of, you know, evaluating how we're talking, escalating it, empathizing with the target, removing friction, look at all end to end in your organization, and then be confident and be strong in your messaging and the way that you come to them. That's something that all leaders can do, and that take control is something that I think all of your sales reps are probably looking for too. I mean, when you as a leader are not confident right now, or just like, God, this sucks. Like, what do we do? You know, versus here's our plan. We're going to get together and we're going to do this right now. I think that goes a long way to making sure that your reps still want to run through a brick wall to be successful at a time like this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I think that in the interest of time, that'd probably be a good place to end. Thank you, Todd Caponi. Thank you, our partners, again, that helped put this program on. Thank you, all the 400 plus attendees that not only joined, but stuck with it through the entire program today. That's great. You know, to Todd's point, as he mentioned, this is actually going to be the first in a bi-weekly cadence of this series that we're going to be doing with Todd. Next session is going to be 1 week from today. We're going to send out a follow-up email. And yes, I did get a lot of questions. This session absolutely was recorded. We are going to make sure everyone knows where and how to access the recording so that they can review this, share this important information with their teams, And just as importantly, we'll be sure to circulate some instructions on how to join not only next week's virtual program, but all of the remaining programs that we have in this series over the next 2 months. So thank you again. And Todd, any parting words?
No, just be strong, guys. Again, it's uncertain, but you can do this. As a matter of fact, you can come out stronger on the back end. So hang in there, and I'm here to help either way, whether you want to do any of these things or not. I love this profession. I love what we all do, and anything I can do to help, I'm here.
I love it. Perfect. Thank you, Todd, and thank you for the hundreds of you that joined today. Have a good rest of your day and have a great weekend.